Brandon Sproat had a perfect spring debut. The New York Mets featured the top 5 in their lineup that we are likely to see on opening day. I'm going to break down everything we saw in spring training today for the New York Mets on this live edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X, Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, this was the first time I got the chance to watch a spring training game start to finish this year. There's been a lot of games that have been on TV. The first game last week, I was able to watch bits and pieces, and I caught the highlights, but I had my best friend's birthday party that I was at, so I had to focus on friends and family a little bit there instead of focusing on the Mets games. This was a treat for me to just sit back on a Friday afternoon, catch a Mets baseball, and you couldn't have asked for a better game. You get the Mets' top pitching prospect as the starting pitcher. You get Brandon Nimmo making his spring debut in the starting lineup, and we got a chance to see a new top 5 in that starting lineup that I'm going to talk about a little bit later on the show that, is probably the group that they're going to roll into the season with, having Nimmo batting cleanup, Vientos batting 5th, and the top 3 have already sort of known for a little bit with Lindor, Soto, and Pete Alonso. But I want to start off the show talking about Brandon Sproat because it was really impressive to watch him work, and you get a great matchup at the start of the game. Brandon Sproat, one of the top pitching prospects in baseball, and James Wood, a guy that prior to his debut last year was the top prospect in baseball, at least by many outlets. I know for us at Just Baseball, we did have James Wood as the top prospect before he made his debut, a guy that got better and better as the season wore on. Not an easy at-bat to start off your spring training debut for Brandon Sproat, and it was a good battle. He rears back, throws a couple fastballs. First one, James Wood just looked at. Second one, he fouled off. He then, had a pitch that wasn't really competitive for the third one, so it was a 1-2 count. Fourth pitch, changeup, not the best one, fouled that off. Then he threw a breaking ball that he didn't really locate. So he's sitting there with a 2-2 count against a really good hitter. What pitch does he go to? A new weapon, a sinker. Throws that pitch, and at the time, you couldn't really tell the location because James Wood, got on it and hammered a ground ball to the right side. I can't remember if it was Pete Alonso or Acuna who fielded it. I think it was Acuna. And James Wood hit it hard, but it doesn't matter if it's on the ground. And so at the time, I was like, man, that was a really well-located sinker. I look back at the StatCast of it. It really wasn't located in on the hands the way you'd exactly want it to. I think that's a pitch that could even be better because ultimately he got it down, but it was still, got a lot of plate right down the middle. But it just shows you how effective this new offering can be for Brandon Sproat. The book on Sproat prior to this spring training where we're seeing this other wrinkle is a guy that has a really good fastball. Obviously he can touch triple digits. It's a pitch that's going to play well up in the zone, pitch you can just throw by hitters. He's also got a great changeup. I would say the changeup is probably the best pitch. I know Arm Layton, who does all the prospect stuff for us at Just Baseball, has compared that pitch to a Paul Skeens Splinker light. Paul Skeens Splinker is his splitter sinker combination pitch, which is just the most disgusting changeup in baseball. And Brandon Sproat has that ability to throw a hard changeup that can really fool hitters when you pair it with that fastball. So those are really the two primary offerings that I think really make Brandon Sproat stand out. And he has the ability to spin some good breaking balls as well. I think the one thing I noticed throughout this start was maybe an inability at times to locate those breaking balls, to land them for strikes. I think when you're ahead on a batter and you're trying to bury that slider low and away against a right-handed hitter, that might come a little more naturally. But when you're trying to steal strikes and pitch backwards a little bit, that can be a little bit tougher. I think right now the area of development for Brandon Sproat is likely really refining his breaking balls a little bit. But the sinker looked natural, and I think that's a pitch that's only going to get better for him when you have a guy that throws a good fastball. Any different fastball where you're just altering the grip, but he's basically still just throwing his fastball. It's just about, how he lines it up and locates it. Has a chance to be a great pitch. And I think what we saw in this outing in particular was that sinker was super effective. He gets that ground out from James Wood. Ahmed Rosario, who I completely forgot is a national now, he came up second, first pitch swing, grounds out on a sinker. He then faced Jose Tena, couldn't really locate a curveball against him, goes back to the sinker, gets another ground out. So 1, 2, 3 inning, all ground outs, 9 pitches, 6 of them were strikes. After that inning, I tweeted out, I think I'm ready for Brandon Sproat to crack the opening day rotation for the New York Mets. And I was joking. I was half joking. There's part of me that is going to watch Griffin Canning pitch or walk Paul Blackburn pitch and even Tyler McGill pitch. And you're going to see Brandon Sproat. And there's something that's way more exciting and enticing about Sproat. The thing is, Sproat is not on the 40. He still can use that seasoning. I don't think he is a finished product. I think his stuff is good enough that he can sort of survive at the big league level, but we do have to see him go back down to AAA, work on some things, and hopefully when he debuts, he's a more complete pitcher that can dominate. But you're seeing a pitcher like Christian Scott last year, a pitching prospect where this stuff is so good that they can live in the zone and not get hurt too much. And actually, I think Christian Scott last year was getting hurt a little bit in the zone with home runs. I'm not saying that's not going to be an issue for Brandon Sproat in AAA this year, but that sinker to me is a real neutralizer that might help him, on that front where he can get those early outs with ground balls. Second inning, I mean, he worked through it in 10 pitches, got a ground out on a four-seamer, soft line out on a slider, and then Robert Hassel, the third, came up, pretty good at bat, goes to a 2-2 count. And, at the time he threw the changeup that was sort of a little bit lazy. It didn't quite connect in the zone. I think it might have got fouled off, but it wasn't a great pitch. It's like he didn't have the put away pitch between the changeup and the breaking ball. So he just said, you know what, let me just rear back and fire. And he grabs 99 and just blows it by him. So he still has that in the toolkit as well that we can't forget about, a guy that can ring it up to triple digits at times, but is going to comfortably get to 98, 99 miles per hour whenever he wants it. He's an exciting pitching prospect for sure. And obviously the top one in the Mets system. So it was good to see him get out there, have 2 very comfortable, easy innings in spring training. Again, 19 pitches overall, 13 of them were for strikes, 6 up, 6 down. You then look at Justin Hageman that came in after, and I think that's where I draw the line, right? Because Justin Hageman has been presented as this next wave of starting pitching depth. I would imagine Jose Urena, who just signed a minor league deal, is going to slide above Hageman. But Hageman, theoretically, is supposed to be the guy that is next after Tyler McGill on your depth chart for starting pitchers. I don't want to see that guy in a Mets uniform this year. It might happen. He's on the 40. And it's not that he has terrible stuff, but when you juxtapose it directly after Brandon Sproat and you see this guy go out there and he just doesn't have great stuff, and he gave up 4 hits and 2 scoreless innings. He ended up putting up zeros, but there was a distinct difference in how his stuff was playing compared to Brandon Sproat. So to me, if it ever got to that point where the depth got that thin, I would say, hey, go to Sproat. The Mets have enough depth right now that they don't necessarily have to go there. They could still, not that we want this, so we'll knock on one, they could still sustain one more injury to their rotation and roll with all 3 of Canning, Blackburn, and McGill in a 5-man rotation to start the season for the first couple weeks. Before you might get Sean Manaea back, when you would need to insert a 6th starter, or I guess that'd be the earliest possible Brandon Sproat debut if nothing worked right and you ended up really tasked in your rotation and you had him make a couple AAA starts that look good, and you say, you know what, this is a point in the season where we're thinner than we're ever going to be, so we're going to rely on the kid early. I don't necessarily see it, but overall, really good outing from him. Jose Budo, Huascar Brazaban, each through a scoreless frame. Not really much you could take from that. Yaxel Rios, who's been with the Mets for now a couple years, who was there all last year. You can see why the Mets like him and continue to bring him on minor league deals, because he, dialed it up to 100, but really couldn't locate the zone. I wasn't very impressed with him. Cameron Foster came in for 1 out to get out of a jam that Rios put the Mets in. And then Luis Moreno, a minor league reliever, had a great end of the game for the Mets. Showcased some really good stuff. Faced 6 batters and struck them all out. Now, granted, he wasn't facing James Wood at the beginning of a spring training game, and I would caution and say that the end of any spring training game is about as uncompetitive of baseball as you might watch, particularly the last 6 outs of a spring game. but he did look pretty good. So that was the pitching side of this spring training game. Brandon Sproat, the big headliner, solid work in the middle there just to see Jose Budo and Brazovan get their work in and put up a scoreless inning. And then Luis Moreno, if you stayed tuned into the entire game, you saw a guy that, not going to factor into the mix this year, but definitely a minor league reliever that will likely reach Double-A this year. And, he can start to take a little bit of a note of that. He's got some good stuff. So we'll see what happens with him. But I want to talk about the Mets starting lineup in the next segment here. What do they do offensively, particularly, but also we'll really dive into what appears to be the Mets showing their hand, what the top 5 in their batting order will be when we get into the season. And I think I like it. It's not what I originally proposed, but I am not mad at it. And we'll go through it all in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off, or if you want to maybe bet on that fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your picks into your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for that late game rally or I'm betting on a player to hit that clutch 3 late, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. It's our texting service. If you want to be part of it, you can go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets or find the description or find the link in the description of any of our episodes. Let's talk about the hitting side of things a little bit here. So the Mets roll out a starting line today of Francisco Lindor, Juan Soto, Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo batting cleanup in his first spring start, and Mark Vientos. Lindor has struggled a little bit so far in camp. Super small sample size, but it was good to see him get a couple hits today. Ripped a leadoff single into left field. Then you saw Juan Soto up, and it was a Japanese pitcher. I'm not sure if he's a starter or reliever for the Nationals. Was it Shinosuke Ugaswara, but he was throwing in these left-hander with these big looping curveballs. And when Juan Soto came up, he swung out of his shoes on one that he swung through. And then the second looping curveball, you saw him time it up better and make an adjustment to, hit a soft, line drive into the outfield that got caught. But it was just the quick adjustment from a super ugly swing to him timing it well and at least getting bat on ball just shows you how good this guy is, because you saw Mark Vientos later on, I think in that same inning, where he couldn't time it up. And he ends up striking out. He was probably really frustrated with himself on that, because it's just this big looping curveball you see it coming from a mile away, but obviously it has good action to it. But I thought as Soto was able to get bat on ball at that second, I'm like, man, if this starting pitcher was in the game 3 times through, there's no way he could get Juan Soto out 3 times. And of course, Juan Soto's second at bat in the second inning, it wasn't a curveball, it was a fastball that was right down the middle, basically. But he does hit his second spring home run, goes opposite field with it, shows you the power to hit it anywhere, really. It was like he was probably waiting potentially for that curveball. I wouldn't call him late on the 90-mile-per-hour fastball, but that pitch traveled a little bit deeper and, just effortless power to left field for Soto to hit that home run. Who was on first base for it? Maybe Acuna was on? Jared Young had got a leadoff single in that second inning, and Acuna switched spots with him on a ground out. First inning again, though, so you had Lindor on, then Soto flies out. Pete Alonso reaches on an error. Brandon Nimmo, first taste, spring training action. You think he wants to be eager. You think he wants to be aggressive, get that bat off his shoulder and riff something hard. He drew a walk, Brandon Nimmo style, loaded the bases for Vientos, who again struck out. Luis Torrens had a really good game, hit the ball hard pretty much every time he came up. And I was sitting there, getting frustrated, even though I shouldn't, over a spring training game. Like, man, this guy's curveball. This guy's annoying me. Why can't the Mets tee off? And sure enough, Luis Torrens was sitting curveball. Watched one, come in there, waited back on it, fired it to right field, got a base hit to score a run. Actually scored 2 runs, I believe, correct? So he scored. Yeah, I think he scored 2 runs on that one. Then there's the 2 runs scored on the Soto homer, 3rd inning. Mark Vientos and Luis Torrens each got singles to lead things off, set the table for Tyrone Taylor. He ripped an RBI single. Mark Vientos got an absolute terrible read on it. Vientos, hopefully the defense continues to come along. We know he's going to be a great hitter, but I'll tell you the area that he's going to consistently lose WAR every single season, it's on the base pass. He is by far the worst base runner on the Mets. Rough. He's not fleet of foot and doesn't get the best reads. Like, you saw Pete Alonso had a hustle double in this game, and just you'd be surprised because you look at Vientos and you look at Pete Alonso, they stood next to each other. You might think that Mark Vientos is the better and quicker athlete, but Pete Alonso is significantly better on the bases. When Pete gets going, we know he has some wheels to him. And it was pretty funny watching him dive for a hustle double in the 4th inning of a spring training game. But Lindor went first to third, and Pete Alonso just went for it in that 4th inning. And then I think a run scored on the Jesus Azucar base hit, who was having a really good spring. Another right-handed outfielder. No options, by the way, just like the outfielder the Mets traded for with the Cubs, Canario? Jose Azucar also doesn't have any options. He's hitting 300 so far in camp, 964 OPS. He's got an outshot shot to make the team, as Starling Marte is not good to go. The Mets scored their 7th run of the game on a soft ground ball off the bat of Mark Vientos. Pete Alonso scored on that play. That was following his hustle double. And Vientos could not beat out a really slow roller. And most guys probably would have. Again, not the fleetest on foot for Vientos. After that, you eventually got into the prospects coming in. Jet Williams got on twice, coming off the bench, walked once, had an infield hit where he ripped one pretty hard down the third base line. Third baseman made a good backhanded play just to stop it. Trying to throw him out, but Jet Williams way too quick. Acuna was in the starting lineup at 1 for 3. I believe that hit was an infield hit, if I'm not mistaken. I think he might have reached on an error as well. Hitting 200 so far in spring. Kevin Parada got in a bat. He struck out. Ryan Clifford got 2 at-bats, 0 for 2 with a strikeout. Alex Ramirez got in that bat, and he got on, I don't know if that was an infield hit or an error, but bottom line, he got on a ground ball hit to the infield. So that was the action for the Mets on the hitting side of things. What I want to do to close out the show, though, is focus in again on that top 5 of the Mets starting lineup. It feels like Carlos Mendoza has come up with the group that we're going to see on opening day. And so what do we feel about that lineup? I'm going to talk about that and take any questions you might have for me in the comments to close out the live stream. So if you have any questions, start to fire them away there. And we're going to talk about this lineup in just a minute. First, though, a quick word for the audio listeners when it comes to the sponsors. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports when you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. If you're watching the live stream right now, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Our goal is to get to 13,000 subscribers by opening day. We're getting closer and closer to the halfway mark, so I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. Let's talk a little bit about the top 5 in this starting lineup. So before we saw any of the spring training games, I came out with my own episode where I broke down my ideal top 5 in the Mets starting lineup. And I had Mark Vientos in the 2-hole. And the reason why I thought that was the best alignment is because I just felt like Mark Vientos could get the most out of Juan Soto hitting behind him. I thought he would see more pitches in the zone, and you might get a better version of Mark Vientos in that scenario. I like Pete Alonso as a cleanup hitter, and I don't necessarily love Brandon Nimmo as a cleanup hitter. So it was a way to make Vientos better, Alonso better, Nimmo better. That was my thought process. Now we're seeing what the Mets are doing, and I can't get too mad at the idea of Francisco Lindor, Juan Soto, and Pete Alonso getting in at bat in the first inning of every game. And that's clearly where Carlos Mendoza is going. So I'm not mad at it at all. I don't know if there is a lineup construction that I would have been upset with. And I do understand breaking up the righties of Vientos and Alonso, or I guess in this case, Alonso and Vientos with Nimmo in between them, because I think, it's not a great idea to stack those two hitters, in my opinion. That would be the one thing I would have been against, because they're similar profiles, right-handed sluggers that can chase a little bit. Now, granted, Mark Vientos is going to run higher strikeout rates than Pete Alonso. You might be surprised considering the year that Pete Alonso had last year, where you think, oh, no way. Pete wasn't striking out more than Vientos, Pete was striking out more than Vientos. Vientos wasn't striking out more than Pete. But if you look at the numbers, Vientos does run higher strikeout rates. And I think Pete Alonso, it's spring training. I don't want to take too much from it, but this is a guy that I think was in his head a lot last year. I thought it was pretty visible to see. Obviously, the contract stuff weighed on him, but now I just think you're looking at a player that is making $30 million this year. I think that was a really good outcome for the Mets. I almost think if they could have gotten Pete Alonso for 2 years and $48 million, it's almost worth it to pay him the extra $6 million to get the version of Pete Alonso that you're going to see this year, as far as maybe that extra little bit of confidence and ease in his mind, knowing I'm the highest paid first baseman in baseball this year. And I'm not going to say that he's going to be the best first baseman in baseball, but he's going to play a lot closer to that level, I think, than we've seen in the last couple of years. I think he's going to get back to who he was in 2022 and playing a little more free and easy. The pressure that Juan Soto alleviates from the rest of this lineup. You now have two guys hitting in front of Pete. They're going to get on a bunch. And I do like Pete Alonso in that 3-hole. I do. I like the first thing the Mets are going to put out there. They're going to put so much pressure on an opposing pitcher. You got to start off the game when you're facing the New York Mets, and you want to get your feet wet. You want to get comfortable. And especially for, these rebuilding teams where, they're throwing out there a fifth starter that is still just trying to, get acclimated to the big leagues and hang on. And their first inning, they got to see Francisco Lindor as the leadoff hitter. And hey, you get him out, that's great. Guess what? Now it's Juan Soto. And okay, Juan Soto, you're able to get through that. You still got to face Pete Alonso. And the chances are one of the first two guys gets on for Pete. And now a pitcher is tight. Maybe they make a mistake. Pete Alonso can make them pay. And I do trust that Pete Alonso is going to take his walks this year, because he always does run really good walk rates. And so then you have a situation where if two of the first three guys get on, well, now Brandon Nimmo's coming up. And I like Nimmo learning how to be a cleanup hitter. He drove in 90 last year. It's not a natural fit for him, but I think he's just a complete enough hitter that he's going to figure this out. And I like sticking with whatever you were going to do right now. And so I'm hoping the Mets aren't going to tinker. I'm happy with it. This is the lineup. Run it out there. Anytime these five guys are in the same game together in spring training, run it out there. And even if these specific five guys aren't in the lineup, hit Brandon Nimmo cleanup. Have him get comfortable to that, because it's going to do one of two things. For one, it's not going to be as jarring when he's in the cleanup spot, come opening day. And then also, I think when you're just talking about the function of him being a cleanup hitter, the two things that it does, for one, it does give you a more complete at bat. So let's just say Juan Soto doubled after Francisco Lindor got out and Pete Alonso strikes out. I like Brandon Nimmo to get that base hit over Mark Vientos in that spot after Alonso had gotten out. I like that side of it. I also think that if your first three hitters all get out, Brandon Nimmo, second leadoff hitter, he's top of the lineup for the second. And then you got, Nimmo, Vientos, maybe it's Alvarez, maybe it's Winker, depending on the day, depending on who's hot. But I do really like that top five with the way the Mets are running it. Again, did I have a preference before this with Vientos batting second and what I thought was a creative lineup structure? I did. Do I think that that's definitely better than what the Mets are going to run with right now? I don't necessarily think so. I think they've found a combination that makes sense. And I like that they'll have five hitters that you just go to the bank with and go to war with day in, day out throughout the season. This is the best top five the Mets have had consistently in some time. Obviously, the lineup last year figured it out and ended up being really solid. 2022, they found something with Marte batting second, and You had Jeff McNeil in that sort of utility lineup role where he was all over the place, but it was, Nimmo, Marte, Lindor, Alonso as your 1 through 4 that seemed to work really well. But it wasn't a top 5 like this. This is the type of lineup that I feel like it's almost something we saw in spurts for different seasons, like 2015. The Mets probably found something. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was by the time they got to the playoffs. What was it? You had Granderson, Murphy, Cespedes, Duda, right? I don't even remember if that was it. But, they've had some. But to me, this team, it's reminiscent of the 2006, 2007, 2008 Mets when you had so many really talented hitters in the lineup with Beltran, Wright, Reyes, Delgado. It feels more like that type of a lineup where it really is deep, and they just have an ability to jump out to early leads. I think we're going to see a lot of that. So I'm happy with the top 5 that the Mets are running out there. I'm going to look through if you have any questions. Let me see if I can find any. Let's see. After a rough outing at the AAA level last year, what will it take for Sproat to shine and show he's ready for the show? Succeeding at AAA, as obvious as that sounds, I think from what we saw today from Brandon Sproat, the sinker is going to be such a bailout pitch for him because he's going to get into a situation where he gets ahead, maybe with the 4-seam, or maybe he lands an early breaking ball where a guy's just taking all the way, and then he goes to the 4-seam, but he's struggling to put a hitter away. And instead of continuing to try to throw these breaking balls to put a hitter away, he can just say, I'm going to throw a sinker right at you. If you're a lefty, I'm going to throw a sinker in on your hands, and you're going to swing at it because you're going to be protecting the zone, and it's going to be clearly a strike, but you're not going to be able to do anything with it, and you're going to hit the ball hard on the ground, and I'm going to get it out. And so I think that sinker is going to be a huge, huge weapon for Brandon Sproat. But what he has to prove to, I think, really reach his upside is being able to throw the breaking balls in any count, to be able to locate them for strikes. I don't think there's that consistency there just yet on the breaking pitches that takes him from being a guy that can just survive on his stuff, but a good lineup will eventually get to him. Mookie Betts is going to be able to hit a sinker. Shohei Ohtani is going to be able to hit a sinker. You go up against Ahmed Rosario and Jose Tena, and you throw a sinker at them, you're going to get some outs. Now, again, James Wood was a tough at bat. He got that guy out. So the sinker is going to be a nice weapon for him, but that's the differentiating factor I think he's missing. Once he shows that, I mean, sky's the limit. And I really do think that he could have a Christian Scott-esque run through AAA where he makes 6-7 starts and he gets better each start and is going deep into games with low pitch counts. And you just realize, yeah, this dude's legit. I like this comment. Sproat is a future ace. If there is a homegrown ace in the Mets system, it's Brandon Sproat. I'll tell you that much. Even more so than Christian Scott. Like last year, we were talking about Christian Scott with his frontline potential. And I was telling you at the time, Christian Scott, scouts are going to say he, has the ceiling going number 3 starter. And that's not a bad thing. Scouts aren't going to just give out frontline grades to many pitching prospects because those are reserved for the absolute top upper echelon pitching prospects. Freddie Peralta is a 3 that has been masquerading as an ace for a couple years now in Milwaukee. It's not a knock on him. He's a really good starting pitcher. Christian Scott could be a really good starting pitcher. There's only a few aces in Major League Baseball. And now I think you're looking at a guy that has that potential. I will tell you, we just released the top 15 prospects at justbaseball.com where I write. Aram Layden does a great job with this. Brandon Sproat was the top prospect, of course, in the Mets system. And when you kind of read through the analysis, one of the things that Aram mentions in here when it comes to outlook, Sproat has flash number 2 upside. And it says with the fallback of a volatile late rotation arm or an elite high leverage reliever, he's going to be an effective pitcher in the big leagues one way or the other. If he can't iron out the breaking pitches and round out the arsenal, he might be a guy that can get hot and really impress at the back of a rotation. And sometimes, he might lose the strike zone or get hit a little bit hard in the zone if he's living there too much. But if everything works out, the fact that he has in the scouting report number 2 upside. That shows you how good he is. And I'll say he has ace upside because I'm not as beholden to scouting grades and comparing Brandon Sproat to Jackson Jobe and to Roki Sasaki and all the top pitching prospects in baseball. I'm comparing Brandon Sproat to the other pitching prospects in the Mets system. And if there's one guy that can be an ace, it's going to be Brandon Sproat. Let's see. Put some of your lineups in there. So we'll run through your suggestions. Dominico says Lindor, Soto, Alonso, Vientos, Nimmo, Alvarez, Marte, Winker, McNeil, Taylor, Siri. See, I don't like the Alonso Vientos stacking. I do like Nimmo batting between them. Granted, I understand that Vientos is a more traditional cleanup hitter than you might see with Brandon Nimmo, but I don't think that matters as much these days. And so I'm pretty happy with where the Mets are going right now. This is an interesting one. Ideally similar an old school top of the lineup. Nimmo, McNeil, Lindor, Soto. I can't see them batting Soto outside of the first inning. He's going to get one of those first 3 at bats of the game, likely to be in that 2 hole this year. It seems like the Mets want to go there. Do you think that Tyler McGill should be in the Mets bullpen? No, I think he should be stretched out to be a starting pitcher because he gives you your best option to come up from AAA and make a start. And we've seen last year, there's going to be stretches where you need somebody from AAA to come up and make starts for a month. And Tyler McGill can do that. And I think he has more upside than Griffin Canning and Paul Blackburn, to be completely honest. I think he's going to force his way into this rotation. I am pretty high on McGill's upside in comparison to the other guys in this rotation. I am curious to see what he does. I think the perfect way to close the show is to take this last comment here, or I guess it is a question. We aren't going to touch on Brandon Nimmo sporting a new look with the beard. Fear the beard. He did have that beard during the playoffs, sort of a postseason beard. I was surprised he kept it, but it looks pretty good. It's a little jarring to see Brandon Nimmo with a beard. He's always been clean shaven, always been sort of that homegrown babyface player where you see Pete Alonso, he's always playing with his facial hair. There's been times where you've seen Pete Alonso shave mid-game, go from a beard to a goatee or a mustache. So we've seen that from Pete a little bit more. Brandon Nimmo, you don't really expect the facial hair game, although when he came up, he did sport kind of similar to what I got working right now. He had a goatee at one point, like 2016 Nimmo, prospect Nimmo. And then he's been clean shaven for a long time now. So I do like the beard and looking forward to see it batting cleanup throughout this season. Anyway, that's going to be all for this postcast. I wanted to do post-game stream because, for one, I just spent a couple hours watching the Mets game and I was excited to talk about it. 2, I wanted to clear the decks and talk about Sproat, talk about this lineup so that I can do a top 10 prospect show for tomorrow. So I'm going to run through the entire top 10. I want it condensed into one show so people can go back and refer to it. I'm going to break down the top 10 prospects in this system, and then anything else that happens on Saturday, we might cover on the Sunday episode. But that is what you had to look forward to this weekend. As always, I appreciate all of you for tuning in, especially those of you who have tuned in live today. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so to miss out on any of your Locked On Mets content. Make sure you find us on social media. You find me at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, you're done with this stream, head over and check out Locked On Sports Today, which is streaming 24/7 on YouTube, giving you the latest on everything going on across sports. If I Locked On Sports Today, again, streaming 24/7 on YouTube.